the Essential Oil Recipe Summit. I'm Elizabeth Ashley, the Secret Healer. And if you're watching on Facebook Live, get ready to like and share because I am joined by the lovely Salvatore Battaglia. Hello, my lovely.
Oh, hello, Elizabeth. Thank you very much.
How are you?
Oh, really well, thank you. Here in beautiful Brisbane, Australia, yes.
Evening there, morning, very dismal morning here, I have to say. So we can see the time differences in a big way today.
Okay, yes.
And this is a tremendous moment for me because you've been on my bucket list to learn from for a very long time. So I'm very excited about today.
Oh, I don't know if you're going to learn anything from me, but thank you very much.
Where is that humility is misplaced. But if there is anybody who doesn't know who you are, can you fill us in? Tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay, where do I start? I'll start with the present. I've just published the third edition of the Complete Guide to Aromatherapy.
Mm-hmm.
The whole project started off back in the late 80s, actually now.
Wow.
It started off as a set of notes that I was using when I started to teach aromatherapy here in Brisbane. We had one of the first aromatherapy courses that we were offering here in Brisbane at the time. And the students really liked these notes. And then very soon, they were asking if they could photocopy the notes to give to students in other colleges because they showed their friends who were studying at other colleges and said, hold on here. And then one student gave me the idea of saying, Sal, these notes are fantastic. Why don't you put them together as a book? And so now, more than 20 years on, the Complete Guide to Aromatherapy, it's a very honor and it's a privilege that the book is being used all around the world as a textbook. I think we've sold well over 120,000 copies.
Have you really?
Thus far, it's translated into Japanese and Korean. So yeah, it's a real honor.
Beautiful and well deserved, I have to say, very well deserved that you've achieved that.
Yeah.
So there might be surprise amongst people who are tuning in and not heard you speak before because your name doesn't sound Australian, Sal.
No,
Where does your name come from?
I do have a beautiful Italian heritage. I was born here in Australia, so I am what Aussies would call like a bit of a skip. Or people from an Italian background, we call skippies, but I was born here in Australia, but both my parents are from Italy. They came over to Australia in the 1950s. My wife, Carolyn, she decided that we should have a bit of a DNA ancestry check.
Oh, did you?
And that came back very, very interesting. Both my parents are from Sicily.
Oh,
and I don't know.
The mafia? I'll be nicer to you from now on.
I was always worried if you Google my name, please disregard. There are two other Salvatore Battaglias and they are not related to me in any way. So just look for Salvatore Battaglia, the aromatherapist. Don't look for Salvatore Battaglia, the boxer, or Salvatore Battaglia, who's, by the way, in jail, I think, at the moment, somewhere in Italy, and another Salvatore Battaglia in New York, who also ended up in jail at some time.
Blimey, they kneecap. Right, you are so being treated with a lot more respect from right now on.
So more than likely, we are related because when we got our DNA testing back, I actually was more than what they considered, because it's an island state, they can actually trace the DNA a lot more clearly, and I was identified as having more than 55% like what they call Sicilian DNA.
Wow.
But in the midst of that, there was Greek, Arabic, there was even a little bit of English.
Wow.
DNA. So because Sicily has been one of these like island regions that has been invaded by everybody around.
Yes, but it was very much in the Moorish wars and things, wasn't it? Yeah. Yeah,
so
that's fascinating. Yeah. And
so
funny.
it's very, very interesting to look at your you know, your ancestry and your past. And it's been quite revealing and quite exciting. Like you just used the word mafia
Yeah.
before. People don't realize that the origins of that, the word mafia, is actually an Arabic word because of the strong Italian, of the influence from the Arabs.
Of the Arab
Now,
food, yeah.
as you know, Sicily now is like very well known
Yeah.
for its citrus fruits,
Yeah.
and produce some of the finest oils in that southern part of Italy. From Calabria, you get the most beautiful bergamot, and from Sicily, you get the most divine lemon oil. So one other thing I need to disclose is I'm also the founder of a company here in Australia called Perfect Ocean. And that's been something, so we specialize in aromatherapy and natural skincare. And we just received, just recently from the producers, we get this most divine organic Calabrian bergamot oil and this divine Sicilian lemon oil. It is so
I
beautiful
bet it
that I
speaks to you on a
decided,
really different level, doesn't it?
yes. And I decided I can't just call this certified organic lemon oil. I've decided we're labeling it certified organic Sicilian lemon oil.
Yes, exactly.
Yes,
Pay homage to the heritage. Very
yes.
lovely.
Thank you.
So I'm going to let people in on a little secret. We haven't planned at all what we were going to talk about today, but you dangled a carrot of a gentleman
Yes.
called Luca Turin, did you not? Who said I might be interested in. And I was very, very well behaved and didn't look him up, but I know that he's from Lebanon. And
Yes.
he's
Oh, I
still,
didn't even know that. Oh,
don't you
yes.
see? You'll never beat me.
Yeah.
And he is very interested in olfaction, correct?
Yes.
Talk to me about him. He sounds
Hmm.
fascinating.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I've always, before I introduce Luca Turin and a little bit about his work and his look, if you pick up one of his papers, it's full of mathematical equations as well, trying to prove his theory of olfaction, which happens to be quite contrary to the traditional understanding of olfaction, which everybody thinks is what they call lock and key, which is basically structural, looking at the molecule. So you have your olfactory neurons and you actually have like this receptor and the right molecule, odor molecule comes along, and if it's the right shape, bang, you get
Correct.
this lock and key effect, and that then sends the message to the actual olfactory bulb and triggers off a whole olfactory impulses.
Yeah.
Luca Turin's, now I think I may get the story wrong because it's been a while since I read The Emperor of Scent, which is a wonderful book that I would highly recommend because it gives you a little bit of a autobiography on his work, and it's kind of it's written in a way that we can understand as well. I just want to make sure I get the author of The Emperor of Scent correct.
It's not him, it's somebody different.
No, I think it's was it Richard or Raymond Burr, The Emperor of Scent. Now that was published back in 2002. Now, so what Luca Turin basically is saying is olfaction is based on vibration. Now, a lot has changed since 2002, and like by no means was he the first person to suggest that olfaction is vibration. This goes right back to the 1930s, where scientists suggested that maybe olfaction is based on the molecular vibrations.
So what are they saying? That these mathematical equations, is he treating it like a wavelength thing?
Well, what he's basically saying is it goes, and I don't want to jump into the G protein coupled receptors yet, but we're all, many of us may be familiar with these G protein coupled receptors, but he's suggesting that they behave like this like a spectroscope where you need an emission of electrons that and these G these G protein coupled receptors are actually measuring the vibration, of the molecules, not the actual shape of the molecules. So, and what I became interested in this, and this is totally not, and I'm sure Luca Turin wouldn't be too happy with this, is this is because I'm sure he's trying to look at it from a very academic scientific basis. And there is this argument, by the way, is still continuing. The most recent paper was published in 2017 by Luca Turin and his colleagues, providing more evidence that this vibrational model does work. But the point is, if it was shape, if smell was based on shape, then it wouldn't be called a theory. But both are still called theories.
Yeah.
So there's still so much we don't understand about olfaction.
Oh,
and,
absolutely. Yeah.
And I've been teaching aromatherapy for over 20 years. And it's been very interesting that when it comes to olfaction, it's something that gets skimmed over. Mm. And it's not surprising, because I've always said that understanding smell, it's the final frontier of science. And I remember I don't forget when it was, sometime in the late 90s, I remember saying, yeah, I'm going to do a science degree. Here I was running my own aromatherapy school.
Got nothing else to do.
Running my own, I had a busy practice at the time, running a practice, and I decided I wanted to do a science degree. And of course I wanted to do a science degree in physiology. Mm. And I think I attended about 2 weeks of lectures, and I said, I just don't have the time, because I also was running the business as well. But I do remember on the first day, the dean of the school, did an introductory speech, and he said, you're getting into a very exciting field, physiology. You could see people go, oh yeah. But anyway, he then started talking about olfaction, the brain, how the brain works, and neuroscience is now turned out. This was back in the late 90s, and it is like the area where people are doing the most research now.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And so, but when it comes to smell and the understanding of smell, why do we still refer to these as theories? And because when I teach aromatherapy, of course I teach the chemistry of the essential oils. We look at the pharmacology. But one thing that did draw me to aromatherapy was my background. Before I studied aromatherapy, and what really got me into the whole complementary medicine field was traditional Chinese medicine. Mm-hmm. And traditional Chinese medicine is about qi. It's understanding energy. So I'd always related my knowledge of TCM to qi and to energy. And therefore, when I think of essential oils, I try to relate to them in terms of qi. What effect do they have on our energy? Mm. And then I said, well, okay, when we start talking about energetic medicine, when vibrational medicine, of course, we try to have an underlying scientific basis for it. And there's a lot of people doing some amazing work in this area. And I thought, well, hold on. We've got, we've got people, doing all this interesting work. I've met some really interesting people in my time that have used Kirlian photography equipment and what they call the GDV, gas discharge voltage. And hopefully I can get one of my PowerPoint presentations up to show everybody how this GDV, gas discharge visualization, works. So it got me thinking, well, essential oils are so rich in energy. Definitely. We know that, don't we? And how do we know they have so much energy? Well, you can smell them. These molecules don't want to sit in the bottom of the bottle. They just want to, burst. They want to burst out of the bottle. And there seems to be so much emphasis now. And maybe it's coming from this Western medical paradigm. We're trying so hard to be accepted by the by the Western medical framework, that the focus seems to be all on the chemistry of the essential oils. But yet, there's been, I forget the name, hold on, I've just got some notes. Can I refer to my...
Yes, definitely.
Like, for example, I just read a book, and it's called it was published in 2012, and it's the book is called End of Illness, and it was by Dr. August. And he's from America, a very world-renowned ontologist. And you know what? In his introductory chapters, he goes, you know what? Maybe we've got it all wrong. You know, the whole Western paradigm, because what we do is we want to identify what we believe is the cause of the disease, and then we usually want to destroy that organism that we believe is responsible for the disease. We then want to cut out any part of the body that has been damaged or diseased, obviously. As an oncologist, I can understand where he's coming from. But he's going, hey, but what about some of these other more traditional systems? And he refers to Ayurveda. And he says Ayurveda, for example, is all about restoring the harmony of the body, of the various forces that influence the body. And so it's very interesting that as an oncologist, he's actually taken us more back to a more holistic approach of healing. Mind you, he doesn't talk about that in his book, but it's a very interesting introduction that he introduces us to.
I think there's a trend there, actually, isn't there? I can hear myself coming back on this song. I think there's a trend there, isn't there, with people saying, right, okay, we step back a little bit and look at how things were done in the past. We learn from the past a little bit now. Yeah.
And I do believe that essential oils take us right back to the past. Now, we will get back to leukoturin soon.
That's all right. I'm enjoying this. Carry on.
So sorry, please be patient with this. But what I don't think, I want to get back to my original discussion. It's very interesting that the way essential oils and aromatherapy is being used today as a standalone therapy. You see, having my background, having come from, before I actually came into aromatherapy, I had training in naturopathy. I have qualifications in naturopathy and also in traditional Chinese medicine in acupuncture. And so I came to aromatherapy from a different perspective. And I came to aromatherapy going, oh my God. Okay, so whether I was prescribing herbal medicine, and people go, do I really have to take these tinctures, Sal? They taste dreadful. So you do your best to mask their flavour, mask the taste, using licorice extract or some other sweet.
That wouldn't help.
Yes. Or I know that my clients would love acupuncture treatment because that was my specialty at the time before I got into aromatherapy. But yeah, the idea of being treated as a pincushion just didn't appeal to people. I still think acupuncture is amazing. But then as I started to introduce the essential oils, I just got this overwhelming response and reaction. And then I started to see some incredible transformations. And I just realized, and it was a beautiful quote, and it was this beautiful quote that it was one of the first books that I ever read. And it was a little blue book, Physician Heal Thyself by Dr. Bach.
Yep.
And so this, I think, was written in the 1930s. And I want to, and whatever class, I often read this out to my students. And I think this underpins everything we should always do as therapists, no matter what modality we are using. And I've actually just realized what I had done is I'd taken snippets and put them together to create this beautiful phrase. But these are all Dr. Bach's works from Physician Heal Thyself. As long as our souls and personalities are in harmony, all is joy and peace, happiness and health. It is when our personalities are led astray from the path laid down by the soul, either by our worldly desires or the persuasion of others, that conflict arises. This conflict is the root cause of disease and unhappiness.
I absolutely agree 1,000,000% with that.
Isn't that amazing?
Just beautiful.
And he then goes on to say disease, in essence, is the result of conflict between the soul and the mind. Mm. And guess what? When I started to use essential oils and introduce them to my practice, and I found that I was almost getting similar results to my acupuncture and herbal medicine using essential oils, but the transformation was often much quicker. And here, people were just even smelling the oil. So it wasn't even the traditional aromatherapy massage techniques that I was using. And I trained with, world-renowned Madame Micheline Asia, and the technique is such a beautiful, powerful technique. And I'd love to talk about that, because then it all links in to what we're now understanding about the autonomic nervous system and the actual massage working on the nerve ganglia along the back. Sorry, I'm going all over the place here, but
doesn't matter, does it?
It all links in, because this is all going to link in, because some of the latest research now, there is what's his name? David Kennedy, who's written this amazing book called Plants and the Human Brain.
Oh my goodness, I have bought this book on your recommendation. Cost me an arm and a leg, but it's blooming expensive, that book is, but wow, I am loving it, Sal. It's fascinating.
Okay. And basically, and you get the gist of what he's actually saying, haven't you, in that book? He actually says that many of, and I'm just going to paraphrase something here, many of the neurotransmitters, neuromodulators, and hormones that are integral to the functioning of our own central nervous system are in fact the chemical products of metabolic processes that existed in plants and animals over 1 billion years ago, because we all came from the one path, genetic path. And then he talks about those plant chemicals which are have the most significant influence. He talks about the alkaloids, which more, if you're into herbal medicine, you'd understand, the phenols, and then the terpenes. So, of course, this takes into account the essential oils as well. And so he comes up with 2 hypotheses. And one hypothesis is to do with, okay, is it because insects, because we have a similar central nervous system to insects, and because we understand the relationship that insects still have with the plants, and this is why. So insects are attracted to the various flowers and so on, whether it be bees, moths, flies, all the insects are attracted. So it's a way of plants to communicate. Have we forgotten those original connections with the plants? I doubt it very much, because if we have a look at most traditional indigenous practices, plants still play a very important role, especially in their spiritual practices, because it heightens. And this is what Professor David Kennedy talks about in Plants in the Human Brain. And he talks about like he talks about even caffeine, like being an alkaloid, and how we become addicted to that. But we've actually modified the caffeine molecule to the way that it would have been traditionally used. But of course, he spends a lot of time then talking about the essential oil-bearing plants, and he's most interested in all the essential oil-bearing plants from the Lamiaceae family, like the sages and the rosemaries, because he's very interested in how he believes that they mimic many of the neurotransmitters. And this is why we've traditionally known these essential oils to be cephalics and like have an incredible effect on the mind. He's now uncovering why they could work. And he's suggesting that more research should be done in this area to find treatments for dementia and Alzheimer's disease, because the drugs that are being used at the moment just aren't working.
No. And actually, I can extend on that a little bit. Something that came up in Dr. Florian Bertmeyer's talk, he nearly knocked me off my chair, actually, because he was saying that plants also have dopamine. So they have they actually contain the same neurotransmitters as we do, and I didn't know that. Yeah, I mean, that's fascinating to me.
So they do contain the similar neurotransmitters. So once again, we do understand that in most cases, the way that we, like when you look at the communication between the neurons, there is this, and it has always been, their whole pharmacology industry is built around molecular shape. And up to now, the drug industry, the perfume industry is based on developing molecules or trying to mimic molecules from nature by looking at their shape. So along comes, I thought I'd get back to Leukotriene.
Eventually.
Along comes Leukotriene, who one day is working in his laboratory, and I think at that time, I don't know if he was working in the perfume laboratory. He's looking at two different molecules. Yeah. Two totally different molecules, but they have the same smell.
Right.
And he said, but hold on, but if everybody says that smell is shape, why do they have a different
molecule?
Why do they have the same smell, but they're different shape? So he decided to plug them into a spectrometer to measure their molecular vibration. And alas, similar molecular vibrations. Okay, so that led him to believe, he did his research and realized there was a chap called Dyson and a chap before that called Wright that had written about this. And he said, could there be a vibrational basis for smell? Now, if it turns out to be correct, it's just going to turn the entire pharmaceutical industry on its head, because we need to look potentially at new ways of developing drugs which may be more molecular vibrational based. Now, this is going to be too hard.
I can say, how on earth would you begin to do that? You would have to use a natural molecule, wouldn't you?
Well, I suppose it's very interesting, because I want to talk about the olfactory receptors. And there was one study, and this one really blew me away, that we can have these olfactory neurons that are what they call ecotopically located. You've heard of that, Elizabeth?
No, tell me what that means.
Where they're found in other parts of the body.
In other parts of the body, like endometriosis isn't in the womb.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
They don't just exist in the in the nose, but they only seem to appear when the body, I like this term that Dr. August uses, when the body is cancering, when cancer is developing in an area.
Wow.
How interesting is that? Now, why do these olfactory neurons appear? Now, this is very recent study. This has only been in the last 8 years or so that they've identified this. Now, it was just that I was reading one particular paper, and they were talking about olfactory receptors on the skin, where there were active carcinomas. So these were on the skin. Now, what they found was that the authors were doing research, and they decided to use and this is where it kind of throws the cat among the pigeons. They were using synthetic sandalwood molecules that gives a sandalol, I forget what, a synthetic santalol or something like that. Okay, why would they have been using a synthetic sandalwood odorant? And then I was reading the paper, and it says, because pure sandalwood essential oil is so expensive. So we decided to use a synthetic sandalwood odorant. Now, it's very interesting that these olfactory receptors were responded to this sandalwood molecules that were being used in this test. Now, but mind you, at this stage, most of this work is still at a very preliminary stage, and so it was all in vitro work. Okay, so they were, they had the tissue so it wasn't on the person. But of course, I like to see, well, okay, where's this research going to take us? So I like to make a big leap of faith and say, well, potentially this is why we've always used sandalwood oil on the skin, topically on the skin. And this is why it is so good as for wound healing. So anyway, what the paper was suggesting is these olfactory receptors activate the wound healing process. When they are activated by sandalwood, these sandalwood molecules, and it activated the wound healing process. So there is so much that we still don't understand about these olfactory receptors. And I think, of course, there is something potentially at a pharmacological level happening, but I think underpinning that pharmacological mechanism, I'd like to believe that there is this vibrational mechanism, because we now understand, and I believe these olfactory receptors are detecting these molecular vibrations. And hence, I like to use this to support my argument when I'm talking about subtle aromatherapy or a more energetic approach to aromatherapy.
I just want to go back to something you said right at the beginning.
Liz, I'm having trouble with the sound.
Do us a favour then, Sal. Just go out of the link and come back in. I'll pause this, right?
Yeah.
You go out of the link and come back. Right, sorry about that, everybody. Hopefully you'll be able to hear better. I was just going to say to you, Sal, something you said right at the beginning of your talk about these GCPRs and this ligand and receptor, and you were saying the odorants seem to act more like a volume switch. Did I hear that right?
Was I talking about my computer? No, sorry. No. No, okay. Look, there's still a big mystery around this. I think what they actually now, I think the new term that they're actually using, if they're not, since then, there's been this new approach, which is suggesting that maybe the olfactory neurons just loosely hold.
They sort of wiggle, don't they?
Wriggle, because see, molecules are wriggling all the time. So how on earth is it actually, you're not going to get this perfect lock and key.
No, exactly right. And there was something in that volume switch that tapped a brain, and people who read my books will already know what I'm going to ask, because so I'm thinking about the endocannabinoid system, right?
Okay.
Which is what the cannabis medicines tap into, right? They too are volume switches for our receptors. So now it's very interesting to me that we're talking about the fact that there would be odorants on the skin trigger healing for sort of cancerous problems, because that would be the CB1 receptor would do that, because I mean, this is just, this is just very quick hypothesis, and there's no scientific grounding at all, just before anybody decides to quote it, because it's just me thinking out loud. But
I love this thinking out aloud.
Exactly. So the CB1 receptor modulates hunger and pain and cognition, and memory and itching and nausea. The CB2 receptor modulates immunity, pain, and inflammation. So actually, probably it's the CB2 receptor if it is one of those receptors. But they too they switch things up and switch things down. That's what they do. They say send more of that neurotransmitter or less. So it's very interesting that this. I do think CB2 receptor, if it's going to be one of them, that it's going right. There's cancer, and then it's found a way to switch a volume on. That's really interesting.
Yeah. Because because they will not be found in normal healthy tissue. And,
Wow.
and they have found the different, and they've actually named them and numbered them. They give them like, you know, individual a numbering system every time they find one of these new olfactory receptors. So they give them a name
Yeah,
and
that's right. Yeah.
a particular number and so on. And they have found them in the intestines, they found them on the pancreas, they found them on the ovaries, and that the body expresses them wherever it is cancering. I just find that really fascinating.
It really
And look,
is.
maybe there is something to say. I would dare not suggest that essential oils can almost, you know, that can be responsible, because cancer is such a complex disease. There are many factors,
Correct.
but I do think that essential oils perhaps can play a very important role in any holistic treatment strategy, not just at a pharmacological level, but also maybe because at this more subtle level, and that I keep getting drawn back to what Dr. Edward Bach had said. But I just want to also talk about what Leukoturin, and this is a well-known fact, it's not just Leukoturin, it says that, you know, the same in the nose, for example, the same olfactory receptor can detect different odor molecules. So it's quite complex, you know, the physiology, because we have so few olfactory receptors. I think there's you know, they're in their thousands, but yet we can detect tens of thousands of different particular odors. And so each receptor is probably responsible for detecting more than one type of odorant. How does it do that? Because it can measure, because perhaps, as Turin is suggesting, it can measure the vibrations. Now they've been able to confirm this with insects, with a particular species of fly that they always seem to be using.
That's
So
got to be Drosophila.
Yes, they always use a particular species of fly, and they've been able to confirm and prove. And what they do is, because I think they just make, I think they're using, I forget what it is, they will put, you know, they will switch one of the hydrogen molecules, so it becomes like a heavy, they put an extra proton or neutron, you know, they put an extra neutron in the hydrogen, and they switch it, so it changes. The shape is still the same, exactly the same shape, but it changes the frequency, the vibration of that particular molecule. And so they have done this many times and proven that this particular fly can detect the difference between these two different molecules that now have a different molecular vibration.
That's
And
very
so, and I
fascinating.
think the central nervous system is fairly similar to that of humans, and for that reason. And this is exactly what Professor Kennedy is constantly talking about with in his book that he refers to.
Very, very interesting. So if we take that piece of information and then we go make a step into actual subtle aromatherapy, how does that impact our understanding of subtle aromatherapy, do you think?
I think it actually all of a sudden, and I think this is going to happen sooner than later, it's going to give us a much more scientific basis for subtle aromatherapy. I dare say that perhaps it's going to take us into uncharted territories, because we are, and this was in a perfumer and flavorist journal, where the title of the paper was called Sesquiterpenoids, the Spiritual Molecules.
Oh, you do read even more than I do, and that's saying something, and you find seriously good shit. I need to read that.
So you can see where this is actually taking us.
Yeah.
And I would hate to think that our own spiritual connection that we make with the world, with ourselves, is going to simply come down to this a scientific molecular basis. But I think going to open up the doors to having a better understanding of why certain spiritual practices have developed over millennia. And guess what is a common feature of all these spiritual practices? Scent.
Yeah.
No matter which culture, you will find that scent is used.
Yeah. And I must admit, I settled down with that Plants and the Human Mind book, and I only got a couple of pages read in amongst all the work I've got, but it did fascinate me. He got right to the crux of the issue, because he was saying that, right, you see these in these spiritual practices, and
Yes.
there are entheogens. And
yes,
so, and then
yep.
I did think, well, actually, why would it be so much more difficult to believe that cannabis could get you connected to the Godhead than
Yes.
Rose attaching you to the vibration of Isis? That's conditioning. That's not a leap of faith, is it? Yeah, I thought it was very interesting, clever how he got there so fast.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, he often refers to that. So I'm often, and this is the challenge for aromatherapy, isn't it? Because essential oils, we do understand how they work, and we've tended to use, and we don't want to discuss the chemistry of essential oils from a pharmacological basis, but we understand how they work that way. We use them in everyday perfumery, and it's really interesting. I will love to mention some of the people that I admire, and there are many people that I admire in the aromatherapy industry, but I just love the work of Valerie Ann Wormwood.
And so do I.
And the fragrant mind. And I just think that's amazing. But guess what? Valerie wasn't the first one to introduce that concept of scent and personality. That goes back to the ancient Greeks, and she acknowledges that in her book. But the perfume industry has long been doing this as well, linking certain personality types to scent. And once again, no matter whether we're looking at it from a more spiritual perspective, personality perspective, what was the word that Dr. Bach used? Our personality or our soul is led off the path. And so this is where I introduce the personality of the essential oils as well. And what I did, this is getting off the track, but what I decided to do is there any way that I can quantify this? And so I chose one of the personality profiling tests, and psychologists don't like these personality tests. They just say personality is too vague, and it really does. And I think they have a purpose, but I think what psychologists have a problem is with, they don't like it when these personality tests pigeonhole you.
Yeah, so are we talking like psychometric profiling? So it says that you're
so we're talking like Myers-Briggs, and like I used the Myers-Briggs, and I've introduced that in the 3rd edition because I find it a very useful tool, but that's all we can use it as. But I don't want somebody to say, oh, I'm introvert, so I'm only going to like essential oils that are introvert, or I'm extrovert, because I think that's a misunderstanding. There are times that we feel that we want to be more introverted. There are times that we want to be more extroverted. I'll be very honest. I've been speaking for more than 30 years in front of students, in front of large audiences, and I have never felt like an introvert and so nervous as speaking here tonight. Because for me, my communication relies on being able to look at the recipient.
Well, you're doing wonderfully. You're doing absolutely wonderfully.
So anyway, so what was I talking about, by the way? I think it's time for my sage and my rosemary.
Talking about how people have predominant personality profiles, and they change and merge. They don't go all for introverted oils or all for extroverted oils.
It was coming back to the essential oils. So that relies on scent. But how do we even make sense of how a particular smell? We can measure it, but the mechanisms to understand how it works is still beyond us. And the science, I simply say sometimes the science is slowly catching up to aromatherapy, to helping us to understand, because I lost my track.
Reverse engineering, isn't it?
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about, so aromatherapy works on so many different levels. And so because it works on so many levels, it's like this wild beast that cannot be tamed like many other holistic practices have been tamed, and like pigeonholed, like, you know, acupuncture, you have now a set sequence of points that you need to use for certain conditions. For herbal medicine, it's very clearly based. It's no different. It fits in nicely to the pharmacological model. But aromatherapy doesn't fit into one unique model. That's what makes aromatherapy extremely challenging. And this actually, it's a bit disappointing that I think this is not the definition being used anymore by the National Center of Complementary and Alternative Medicine. And this is out of America. I don't even know if it's called that anymore, but it's the one that I like to refer to because this is from 2002, and I know that they have changed the different categories for complementary medicines. But these were the 5 categories that they said all complementaries fit into. One is the alternative medicine-based systems. So they're talking Ayurveda or Chinese medicine. One is the mind-body interventions. 3 is biological-based therapies. 4 is the manipulative and body-based therapies. And then 5th one is the energy therapies.
It could actually go in any of those, couldn't it?
Exactly what I'm saying. Exactly.
And that's why it's such a beautiful discipline, because it can be, I mean, that's what people will see from this summit, that how many different ways you can use the modality.
Yes, exactly. And so we have a difficult time to put aromatherapy into any context. I tend to agree. And this was a comment that Kurt Schnabelt made back in 1999. It's a practice without a theory. It's disjointed. It's all over the place. But I think that's what makes it very exciting. Yeah. And then we had somebody in Australia, and I love, you know, her PhD is available online. It's like the professionalization of aromatherapy. We had Janelle Sheen do a PhD on how can aromatherapy be professionalized. Because in Australia, we have seen, and I think this is happening around the world, therapies like acupuncture and Chinese medicine get degree status. Naturopathy getting degree status. But that has not happened to aromatherapy. Why hasn't that happened to aromatherapy? Janelle Sheen had proposed that one, and she didn't say this was the only, she just said one of the pathways to help aromatherapy to gain a more professional status would be to embed it within a nursing framework, nursing qualification.
Yeah.
You know what? That makes sense, but it's not the pathway, and she acknowledges that. Now, one of the pathways I would have proposed as well, and I think she does mention this, is that it could be embedded within a naturopathy. Because when you're seeing a client, while I was saying, going back to what I said, how I got involved in aromatherapy, of course, it isn't just the essential oils, it is the counseling, there's lifestyle advice, there's nutritional advice. Sometimes there may need to be intervention with herbal remedies as well that complement. And this is my concern is with aromatherapy, there is still too much reading something about a herb but then you see frankincense or rosemary, and we don't differentiate, is this the herb or is this the oil? This has happened too often. And I think it comes about from some of the earlier French books, but like from Dr. Jean Valnet, but he acknowledged that the oils, because the oils are part of the herb, and he does, but people have forgotten that, no, sometimes he's talking about the oils, but sometimes he's actually talking about the whole herbal extract, and we tend to have gotten confused.
You're right, and I've done that in the past. There's an old website that I was in charge of a very long time ago, with one of the few pages about Damiana essential oils. Very, very little written about it.
I don't know anything about it. Please tell me.
Oh, it's a fantastic aphrodisiac oil. But one of the contraindications that I've listed on there is that it shouldn't be used if you've got diabetes. And the only way that I could get to that was through the herbal medicine, because there's nothing written in Tisserand or anything like that. But actually now I have no access to the website to be able to put it right. But actually we know now from research that's gone into the oil that actually the constituent that would affect the pancreas is not there. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. But maybe it was the herbal extract?
Herbal extract, yeah.
Yes, the herbal extract, yes, okay. Yes, and we do know that the herb has traditionally had those
correct
properties as well.
Yeah.
Which comes back to the way in which comes back to the way when I look at the way essential oils are used, I tend to look at them energetically. I tend to look at them more from having my background being TCM, I tend to use it more from a TCM framework. So I will either use the 5 elements, or I will use, even when I'm looking at the client, I will look at the external factors, the internal factors that are often the catalyst for disharmony, disease occurring. And that could be like the internal factors are usually the emotions. For example, the external factors are the seasonal changes, or the external forces, the wind, the heat, the cold, the damp, that are like the catalyst when they go out of balance. But what these modalities identify, and to that they link personalities. They link, so each of the elements, each of the dosha has certain characteristics.
Yeah, and I think that certain illnesses develop a kind of emotional phenotype as well, don't they?
And once you put it into this context, exactly, it makes a lot more sense why somebody who is has a strong wood element is probably more going to be related to have a nervous disposition, or a lot of anger issues, for example, or somebody with a very strong fire constitution is going to be more prone to psychological depression, for example, or somebody with an earth disposition, strong earth element influence is going to be more prone to a worrying disposition.
Sure.
So exactly. What I would like to see is that maybe, because each of these elements, each of the doshas, we know we are attracted to certain smells, certain scents. So I didn't know
that. I didn't know that. Tell me more about that.
Well, we kind of all do this. We kind of say, well, these are like the fire, these are the oils which those with a strong fire constitution are going to be more drawn towards. These are the oils, that somebody with a more wood constitution will be more drawn to. Now, why is this so? So from that, we can match the personality type, but maybe one day, when we have a better understanding of the vibrational theory of olfaction, the term that I was wanting to refer to is the swipe card model is being used now. The swipe card model.
I'm stealing that. I'm stealing that.
And you know what? It said, can it not be possible, and more than likely it is possible, that scent is based on both the structure of the molecule and the vibration of the aroma molecule are both important.
Yeah, I
And I
definitely
think,
think that's the case. I
yeah,
mean,
so it's not
when
that
you look
one
at,
is right and the other is
no,
wrong.
exactly. And when you're looking at how physiology works, in fact, I'll use this actual slide in my presentation about pain. When you see how the body's firing in so many different ways, you've got molecules going that way, that way, that way, across the top, like a motorway intersection. There's so many things going on. Why would it be an either or? Nothing else in the body's like that.
Exactly,
Mm.
exactly. And just to give you an idea, this came from one of the most recent papers that was refuting Luca Turin's work. And I think it was published in 1917. And it kind of concludes with a comment like this. The fact is that it is still not possible to predict the performance of odor molecules using shape or vibration alone.
Mm.
So we are still no better off to
Something
with
else is
absolute
out there.
luck, you know, because I think it was only in 1994 that that two scientists got a Nobel Prize for understanding, linking these G protein coupled receptors and the
Correct.
olfactory neurons and so on, and understanding the basis, having this basis for scent,
Yeah, exactly
for
right.
smell. Yeah, so
So,
it's a recent phenomenon, this understanding that we have for smell.
so how do you see that tapping into the aura and chakras then? I mean, obviously, this is just completely hypothesis, but how do you see that affecting the aura and chakras when you smell a smell?
Now, I think we would have to do we would have to have another discussion about chakras on their own.
Yeah.
Okay, but what is the one thing that we talk about when we talk about auras and chakras? We talk about energy.
Yep.
And energy is vibration. Energy is frequency, and it's been able to measure, it's understanding. I think maybe one day we will have an understanding of the different diseases, and I'm sure people are doing research having a different vibration, having a different energy. And it's about tapping in, matching the frequency of the energy of the essential oils with that disease.
Yeah.
Don't you think? Yeah.
I
So,
do, yeah.
and so this is where, and so I find that the auras and the chakras are just another model. Now we can debate, I won't say the shady origins of chakras. I think it's a very illuminating and very interesting path that the chakras have taken. But everything that we tend to talk about chakras nowadays is kind of more of a Western construct rather than the traditional Eastern, Tantric, Indian original construct of what chakras are. And but I think that Western construct, a lot of it has been, you know, it was through the Theosophical Society at the beginning of the 20th century and the late 19th century that the interpretations of these traditional Indian texts, Tantric texts, were made, and slowly over the last 100 years, you could say, what we know of chakras have been developed. And I think what has developed is quite a beautiful construct.
Yeah, it's the realm of Pinterest now. But it is very beautiful medicine.
It helps us to understand perhaps that, and this is where the traditional origins of the chakras probably did develop, because it's about raising and elevating our level of consciousness. And basically, and I would hate to think that it's not necessary, the whole idea that it's a step-by-step process is once again a Western construct, because our chakras can be all over the place.
Yeah.
But these energy centers are there for a reason. Now, when we have a look at the relationship, and perhaps we can understand, because the early texts relating to chakras didn't relate the chakras to different nerve plexus, for example, or different endocrine glands. But all the more recent texts, well, talk about endocrine glands associated with each chakra and different nerve plexus associated with the chakras. Now, these are areas which are highly concentrated with specialized neurons.
Correct.
For example. And this goes back to, once again, to Kennedy's book, Plants in the Human Brain, because he talks about acetylcholine esterase inhibitors, and he talks about the role of essential oils. And the nerve plexus in particular are very dense in these neurons that rely on acetylcholine.
Yeah, because, well, and also I think that it's fair to say if you go to like Candice Pert's, Dr. Candice work, she says that she said that she feels like when you have a surge of neurotransmission, that's the actual physical feeling that you, the sensation you feel in your body. So if you, following that, then we know that their movement creates a feeling in our body. So there's clearly great big concentrations of areas of them. And I can remember in her book, she'd said that as she started to locate areas where there were large concentrations of neurotransmitters, you could lay a picture of the chakras over the top and they were pretty much identical. Yeah.
Exactly. So these are very highly activated energy centers. They are, because we know that there is a lot of energy transmission occurring here. Now, a lot of the latest research is going that essential oils can have such a profound influence on these, particularly on these different energy centers, and and we also activate these energy centers and these nerve plexus when we do, I will use the word, simple aromatherapy massage.
Sure. Yeah.
So we tend to activate these nerve plexus when we combine the physical acts of the massage by activating these nerve plexus by using essential oils that can potentially enhance the nerve transmission. It is not surprising that aromatherapy has such a profound influence on the autonomic nervous system.
No.
And of course on the subtle energy system as well, because they are linked. They're one.
Completely.
The subtle body and the nervous system are really one. It's just that our current knowledge or construct of the nervous system is still fairly primitive. That's what I'm hypothesizing.
I think as well that we're in a kind of similar situation, really, that when researchers are looking at essential oils for medicines or what have you, they're looking at the oil and they're saying, or the plant, and they're saying, well, we know that it's good for epilepsy. We want to understand why it's good for epilepsy, and that will help us to elucidate what's going on in the physical body, actually help us to understand the human body more. And I think it's the same sort of thing with the vibrational healing, isn't it? They're going to have to do that reverse engineering to understand, well, what's going on in our body. That's not about the essential oil at all. It's about what's happening here.
Yes, yeah. So look, I think eventually, sort of, not wanting, going back to your original discussion, is eventually, whatever happens, we know that this original, well, it's not the original, but the proposal that Luca Turin made about the vibrational basis for scent is here to stay.
I think so.
Because we know, he's proven that this is what happens. But it's going to eventually, we're going to understand that it's a combination of both. And that's why they've had to change this new term, this white card theory. But I think it's going to potentially revolutionize the way we think of essential oils.
Yeah, interesting.
I think we will be able to use the discoveries that are happening now, not just to understand, it's going to be a new pharmacological paradigm, but it's also going to help us to understand why the essential oils have such a profound effect on the central nervous system, and can be so beneficial for conditions such as Alzheimer's, but also it's going to link. So the subtle, the spiritual side is going to become mainstream eventually as we uncover. And this is why I am fascinated with this work, and I'm keeping up to date
You are
with commentary. Now, I'm just worried that we haven't given, but I think that is the title of this whole conference, and it's beyond the.
I think you've absolutely delivered, because if that doesn't tell us why we go beyond the essential oil recipe, I have no idea what does, because it was beautifully elucidated.
Yeah, but most of the time when I give classes, there's almost this expectation that people get recipes and blends.
Do not use that word in my presence.
Okay, so we won't give any recipes and blends.
I'm only joking, because I mean, they have their place, don't they? And I think that they definitely have their place, especially in like acute medicine with coughs and colds and stuff like that. You know, you've caught a bug, so let's kill the bug. But I think when somebody's got a long-term chronic illness, probably not responding to the doctor's treatment, then it's definitely got its place. And going back to what you were saying about cancer, one of the things that I find absolutely fascinating, and I'm sure that my readers can absolutely recite by memory, is my fascination with this, is that when the body has high levels of serotonin, which is the mood modulator, amongst other things, has about 30 different functions. When it has high levels of serotonin, that affects chemotaxis. So illness markers, whether those be tumor necrosis factor, whether they be inflammatory markers, they slow down.
Yes.
So if you're happier and you're calmer, then you're really fortifying your body in a big way. And, you know, that's in probably the most simple term, that when the doctor says the best thing you can do is manage your stress.
Yes.
It's absolutely true. And there's no better way to do that than with essential oils.
That's awesome, because I often mention, when I do one of my presentations, and it is to do more with subtle aromatherapy, I start off with this United Nations World Happiness Report.
Right. What's that? I like the sound of that.
Once again, just go online and Google World Happiness Report.
Oh, we need that.
No matter where you're from, just before you download them, they're available as a PDF, free PDF. They do it every year now, I think, but it's very interesting. And each year they pick a certain topic to focus on. One year, the focus was on the relationship between happiness and mental health. The most recent World Happiness Report looks at displacement of populations. As you can see, there's and sort of the effects that has on people's health and well-being. Often, each report it ranks about 100, all the countries in the United Nations, about 170 something countries. It ranks them, and it looks at various measures. And it is not just the GDP, it is like the standard of healthcare provided, it is levels of corruption. There are many different factors, the level of social support within the country. And what I do is, there's about, I won't say 7, I think there's about 6 or more factors. I relate each of those to the chakra energy centers.
Do you? That's clever.
Yes. Yeah, and so it gives you, and like one is, how much does the society value individuality?
So that's solar plexus.
Yes, and then how, well, food and shelter, for example,
that's
how well is that?
And the diaspora root chakra. Yeah. Clever, Sal. I like it.
Yeah. So freedom to express oneself.
Throat chakra.
For exactly. So it's quite It's quite, I love linking that World
That's very
Happiness
clever.
Report to each
Yeah.
of the chakra energy centers. Yeah,
Beautiful.
but it
And
is very.
do you talk about that in your new book? Let's tell people about your new book, because that's a great time to move on.
That is, can I actually just bend down and reach across?
Do it. It just so happens that I have concealed about
Just so happens. Hold on. I've got bookshelf in front of me and behind me. You might have a copy of this book.
Keep it still. I do. With lovely chamomiles on the front. Moving on.
I have actually.
Chamomiles.
I don't know why, but I love the chamomile. And you know what? I haven't written about this. I've chosen, you know what the other flower is there?
I'm guessing that's a ylang-ylang, is it?
Ylang-ylang, yes.
Yeah,
now,
flower of flowers.
So now this is the 3rd edition, and your question was, is that addressed in the Complete Guide to Aromatherapy? This is the Complete Guide to Aromatherapy. This book is now going to has become 2 books, but I've only written part 1. And this is just predominantly focused on the essential oil monographs, which are I believe are the most detailed essential monographs that are ever published. I have some really wonderful introductory chapters. When I started writing the 3rd edition, I thought, oh yeah, there are going to be some chapters that I don't have to change. History doesn't really change, does it?
Yeah.
But you know what? I think most of the history of essential oils is so European, Western focused.
Yes.
And so when I started to look more deeply into history, I just started to realize that there was so much more influence from India, from China, and from the Middle East. So if
you're anything like me as well, as soon as you finish writing it, somebody tells you something else, and you go, I wish I put that in.
Yeah, of course. And that's why, of course, I've started my own website after all these years. And so I'll as I get get excited about something, that it will get published as a blog on my website, which is simply salvatorebattaglia.com.au. Now, going back to this book, so your question is that information about the happiness report, chakras, and so on is going to appear in volume 2. This is volume 1. Now, volume 2 is probably going to take me another 12 months to finish.
Right. Well, we'll give you 11. Get on with it, Sal. We want to read it.
I don't know about that.
No pressure.
No pressure. Oh no pressure. Yeah. So
I think that'll be so exciting.
Yeah, but look, it's something like, for example, I visit Japan quite a lot, and there was just this beautiful term, Shinrin Yoku, which simply
tell us about that.
Japanese term, which simply means like bathing, taking a bath in the forest. Now, how do you you don't literally take a bathtub into the forest, but it's about, the term bath really means to immerse yourself. It's immerse yourself into the energy of the forest. Feel the forest. Feel how nature makes you feel. And that is engage all your senses, not the smell, the sights, the feeling of the sunshine on the skin. So even tasting things. So you engage all your senses to experience the forest. So most people want to do an activity. They want to climb up the mountain. They want to jog through the forest path.
Build a hut. My son always wants to build a hut.
Build a hut. But it's just about being still, being quiet and listening to nature, being part of nature. And this is what this term means. And then it made me realize, hey, there is I think, somebody's come up with a term called biophilia, and it's about this deep connection we've always had with nature. And all these studies, then I realized, hey, there are all these studies showing that spending time in nature has all these positive health outcomes,
Yeah.
which are related to lifestyle diseases. It makes us feel happier. It increases our serotonin levels and dopamine levels. And so it reduces the risk of inflammatory diseases and heart disease and cardiovascular diseases. So it's incredible, the research that is going on relating to biophilia and Shinrin-yoku. Now, essential oils. One of the key researchers in this area talks about, sometimes we can't get into nature. And his final chapter in this wonderful book that he's put together is you can bring essential oils into your home. They're not going to replace Shinrin-yoku, but they will play a very important role in reconnecting you with nature.
A
And I think that's beautiful, a bridge. And that's a beautiful place to end up on, talking about essential oils, because they do whatever your favorite oil is. It's reconnecting you with your favorite part of nature.
And do you know, one of my very favourite things to do is to go and hang out in skincare shops. So I think you need to tell us about a very exciting new one that has opened. Your neck of the woods.
As I did allude to in the beginning, I do own a business called Perfect Potion, and we're pretty much only in Australia and Japan at the moment. We do have some distributors that distribute our products. And I don't know, I've just liked the idea of being more of a grassroots, homegrown business. I like to think locally. We try to source things locally, but of course with essential oils, that is not possible, because essential oils, and that's why I think essential oils are a great connection with humanity, because you have to discover new countries to find new essential oils. But we make a range of beautiful products here in Brisbane, Australia. We have our own manufacturing facility. Basically, I started making products from my mum and dad's kitchen back in the early 80s. And this was before we introduced the need for good manufacturing practice, GMP or quality assurance standards. But I was the quality assurer. I did everything myself. Yeah. But nowadays, so yeah, we're opening up shops organically. Can I just quickly tell you a story about this chap that I met in Japan who does this gas discharge visualization using curling photography equipment?
Yes, please do.
Yeah,
you got your slide?
Yeah, I can't. I'll explain it.
Just go for it.
I'll explain it. But he did one particular. He does it with the chakra energy centers and so on, and that was quite amazing. Some of the images, and maybe we can send them out somehow. I'm happy to share those images.
Well, that would be nice
with everybody. Yeah, to show the effect that the essential oils can have. But one thing, pardon the pun, is I use the word we're growing the business organically. We source organic essential oils, certified organic essential oils. Very, very important. He did this without me knowing. He actually grabbed a sample of our certified organic lavender oil, and he grabbed a commercial grade lavender oil, and he did the GDV analysis to measure the energy intensity and energy bandwidth of the oil. And what he found with the organic oil, it had a much broader bandwidth.
Am I thinking the right things? They look like they're a picture that looks like the aura.
Yeah, no, this was just, this was just like a graph, and it had like all these lines.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. But the non-organic oil was fairly low and had a very small bandwidth, whereas the organic oil had a much higher bandwidth for the essential oil, which is very interesting. Because often when we talk about using essential oils at a more subtle level, energetic level, less is better, but also making sure that it is pure and organic is even more important.
I would be interested to see what it came out with Wild Harvested, to see how that compares as well. No human intervention.
This is another topic. This is another topic for discussion, because don't get me distracted. I'm getting hungry now. I'm getting late. But as you know, there are several essential oils that it is becoming more and more difficult to collect from the wild.
Correct.
As a result, we've actually made some essential aromatic plants. We've put them on the endangered species list.
Yeah.
Sandalwood is one of them.
Correct.
Now, Australia, I like to scope that apart from, I actually don't follow cricket or anything like that, but I don't know how our cricket team
Scandalous behaviour.
compares to the English cricket team or New Zealand cricket team. But I do want to mention, I think we're a pretty clever bunch out here in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that is happening for the first time in humankind's history is sandalwood, Santalum album is being produced from cultivated trees.
Yes.
Now, I don't think this has ever happened before in the history of humankind. In Australia, we haven't done that good a job, but we have good systems in place to ensure that our indigenous sandalwood trees, Santalum spicatum, are preserved, but they're still not being cultivated. But up in the Ord River region, northern regions of Western Australia, there are tens of thousands of hectares of sandalwood trees under cultivation, and the essential oil they're producing is quite interesting. Now, which brings me back to your question.
Yeah.
Traditionally, sandalwood would have been harvested from a tree that was growing in the wild. Now, that tree was probably a lot older as well. So I am sure that the age of the tree will affect the essential oil. Now, they've proven that the chemistry of the oil is fairly similar. Now, they're producing good quality sandalwood oil from trees that are only 15 years old. Now, we know, and they know, these farmers know, and they're keeping batch, everything is like marked. This is from 2000 year, this is from 2001, and you can see, this was a much better season when we planted. The trees have grown, taken off much more quickly. But I am sure that the energetic qualities of the sandalwood may be different.
Correct, I'm sure that's true.
Yeah.
Whether they're inferior is a different kettle of fish altogether.
The aroma is incredible. The aroma is incredible.
I have smelt Australian sandalwood. It is beautiful.
Which is from plantation trees. Yeah. And look, and they've had to, what I like is I've been up there and they've created a little forest, because I don't know if you are aware, but sandalwood, I don't know what the technical term is, but it's like a little vampire tree. It's a parasitic tree.
Oh, is it parasitic?
It relies on host trees. And the way that they have cultivated it is quite clever. It actually relies on 3 different host trees. And this is allowed for the sandalwood tree itself to grow more quickly.
So is it parasitic in the way that mistletoe is parasitic, that it actually lives on another tree, or just its roots feed off of the tree?
Only feeding off the roots, and it will eventually kill the host trees. It actually almost sucks everything.
Like a sycamore?
Is that another tree that relies on another tree? Yeah.
Oh, now, they're invasive species here.
Okay. Now. It's interesting that we have here in Australia, they've decided they were very cautious not to introduce the traditional host trees that would be found in Indonesia or in India, and they've used some Australian native species as the host trees. So even is that going to, once again, it doesn't affect the chemistry, because we're producing this beautiful sandalwood rich in the alpha and beta santalol, but energetically, what is that doing when we change? See, so once again, your comment was, how have the essential oils changed? Now, my concern, as they go from, and look, the future of essential oils, I think sadly cannot continue to be wild harvested. I don't know how with the popularity in essential oils, we're going to decimate more native species if we continue to wild harvest it.
Take without putting back.
It's interesting. An oil that's now become vogue around the world, oregano oil. I was reading that like 50 years ago, most oregano oil was wild harvested. But now I think you would find it very difficult to get a wild harvested oregano oil. It's hard to believe that once upon a time that lavender was wild harvested, but nowadays it's mostly plantation grown lavender. Yes.
Got to respond to demand, haven't you?
Exactly.
I said this, I can't remember whose lecture I've said it in, so I am repeating myself, but it's interesting to think of. So when I first did my diploma, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, we had
I cannot believe that.
We had to do this vibrational experiment with lavender oils. So we were given a high alpine lavender and a Croatian lavender. So, and at that point, it was right in the middle of the civil war. You know, Yugoslavia was breaking down, Croatia, Serbia, they're all disappearing. And honestly, you almost didn't want to touch the Croatian oil. It was just, it felt venomous and fierce. You could feel the toxicity in the oil that was sitting in front of you. Now, I will be clear now that if you pick up a Croatian lavender now, that's not how it feels. It feels absolutely tranquil. So please, people know that. But yeah, just you could, and there was maybe, you know, there was chemicals in the ground perhaps from the war, but you could feel the troubles in comparison to the beautiful tranquility of the high alpine lavender. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, because anything with so much energy also absorbs energy.
Correct. Yeah.
So it becomes like this. Yeah. So it retains.
It's like a sponge.
It's like a sponge that it retains the energy from the environment. So it takes on the qualities of the environment, most definitely.
Yeah. And again, probably you wouldn't see that in the chemistry. It's been entirely
Yeah.
Sal, I have loved this today.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you, everybody, for listening, and I hope you've really enjoyed what I've had to say. There is so much more, and I'm sorry that I haven't provided you with any recipes.
That's very naughty behaviour. So, say goodbye now. I'm only being kind to you now that I know you're in the mafia. So say goodbye before we get
I hope not. Sorry, don't take Elizabeth seriously on that one. Thank you so much. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thanks.